All right, I thought I would discuss something that's pretty important, actually, and that is the cultivation of wisdom and intelligence and so on. I've just got a few thoughts here, real quick. I'll start with Wing Chun Kung Fu, Lao Tzu's Wu Wei, or effortless slash non action, Adam Smith's Invisible Hand of the free market, and the Christian tradition of God's hidden providence for the majority of people, and the um, rareness of action or any mind blowing revelations or anything like that for most people, the absence of that for most people. I just started beginning to understand Miyamoto Musashi's Book of Five Rings better now, in retrospect, uh, as a developmental path to mastery. Um, so here I'll start. I'll start with the meat of the argument here. When you truly master critical thinking, you will make things happen without anyone knowing you did. And by the way, there's a YouTube video called Bender and God from Futurama, and if you remember that, the God figure basically just kind of um, does things without Bender realizing he did them, sort of, and so on. And says the best way of doing things is when people don't know you did it at all, or that you're the one who did it, in a sense. Now, there's a caveat to that, in a sense, but I'll get into that in a second. Okay, so low-resolution thinkers already move through the world knowing they don't know everything. Higher IQ people run the gauntlet of trying to know everything until they collapse and have to face they've got limits too. Next up is accepting the world runs along with plenty of idiots and still works. And that's, I'll get into the effects of that and so on after this. Then it's just a matter of discernment of when your attempts to change something are ego preening or actually going to bear fruit. Trying to be the smartest is one step above not even trying, but it's still singular. The world being idiots can lead to pridefulness, and then discernment can be manipulation or something like that oriented. So you see people who fall to bitterness and resentment and do that crap, the bad stuff. That's why politicians are, while semi-smarter than average, are also so evil most often. And it's literally based on the autistic desire to have control over others because you don't have control over yourself. And basically what's going on is there's a dark and a light version of this, basically, which is I want to understand the world because it's an inner drive of mine and so on, versus I want to understand the world to control it, is the negative version of that, in a sense. Because you're putting your cart before your horse in some sense in motivation, right? I mean, there's a duality of both can be true at the same time to some extent, but if you're more on the side of I want to learn for learning's sake, just to know the stuff, then you're slightly better off as a person, probably, or a better person at that. As for the world being relatively simple-minded and so on and still working, the acceptance of that in those traditions I mentioned, like Lao Tzu, Adam Smith, the hidden providence of God, and Bender and God from Futurama, and the principles of Wing Chun Kung Fu. Minimalism in action is kind of the name of the game, and just doing the right thing at the right time, but minimal action overall, no wasted effort kind of thing. Um, and then the third part where you can use discernment to decide how to get things done. You can either manipulate people to go against their natural inclinations to get what you want done, or you can cultivate people and grow them as people properly, and they will become stronger, more resilient, and naturally attuned towards things if you're rightly attuned towards what you want to do, roughly speaking. And then you accept that you don't control every little thing. You don't always get your way, but you generally, more people will generally get their way more often on average. And I've got an explanation for why that is in a sense, which is why socialism's for economics and politics and so on. I've got an example here. Why socialism spreads is when things get worse, people automatically look to control things. When things are going well, they learn to let go. You have to negotiate the right balance for the situation. But when one control freak exists, everyone else gets on edge and becomes slightly more controlling. So socialism spreads like that. It takes a form of active effort on oneself to avoid it and gently guide others to individual thinking again and calm them down. So that there's a yeah. And basically what we learn is the midwit is the socialist. Now, those are the slightly higher IQ people who realize they can control things a little better in some ways than average people, or at least be able to dissect it and decipher the high resolution image as opposed to the low resolution image. But you see, the thing is, normal people can get by with lower resolution images of the picture because they're stronger at contextual understandings and so on. Whereas the autistic people are high resolution, but very poor at contextual, situational discernment or judgment. But they've technically got higher IQs. And the people with the lower IQs but are not autistic are generally a bit wiser than the autistic people are, and the autistic people are more intelligent than the non-autistic people are. So that's going on. So that's what's going on there, basically, and why it's like, why the bell curve meme exists, where it's like low IQ take, it's like, I hate orcs, and then the mid IQ take is, orcs are just social economic conditions oriented. If they weren't living in tribes, they'd be like us. And then the high IQ take would be, I hate orcs. So that's what's going on there. You know. So the light versions of the 3 steps of put in the effort to become smart, realize the world operates from idiots, and figure out when your actions will actually have a desired impact. It is, the negative version is, I must control things, people are idiots and need to be controlled, and how do I manipulate them to do what's good for them, in my opinion. The proper way, the light way, is I wish to know more because learning is fun. And then people are different And some are smarter, some are dumber. But the world seems to work regardless, day to day, just fine, based on these people who seem dumb to me in some ways. You know. And then the third step is how do I, in the positive direction, is how do I cultivate others' ability to operate with a gentle guidance and so on. And it's not manipulative, it's not secretive exactly, it's more like, have you ever considered this path of an approach and so on? And the two natures are diametrically opposed for the most part, but maybe not entirely. Like there's a spectrum you can fall on any given thing between controlling and cultivating and so on. But basically the emphasis is on strengthening other people so that they can help you out when you need it as well. And this is the light side of the force and the dark side of the force in some sense. That's basically what it's about and so on. But the reason why people turn to the dark side or socialism is because they're desperate in some fashion or other. So when you have the material conditions of desperation, it spreads like a zombie plague and makes more zombies and so on of socialism. And that's why the downturn in economics in 2008 led to the whole rise of socialism and so on, and woke and so on, because people were spiraling out of control. And it takes a certain degree of effort to bring things back and so on. And it's easier to destroy than to build. And if you're manipulative, then you really cannot build something useful in general society anyways. But you can use other people to get what you want better initially. But as the system is worn down and torn apart by everyone only looking out for themselves, it gets worse. But some people can begin to understand the process of that and then look at the opposite direction and look to building again by using the meta progression or the meta process as an understanding of what's going on, and then struggle in the opposite direction back to building things up again. Or letting people build themselves up, or letting people build each other up or something. And one's more about letting people do stuff more often and only intervening sparingly, and one is more about controlling as much as possible, and only when you fail to does someone not be controlled by you. And that's what the whole socialist planned economy thing and all that stuff, and the one world government, globalist green agenda, depopulation, climate change obsession, and Islam and so on is all about, basically, and why communism is so bad, why all socialism is bad and leads to genocidal outcomes. Because when you're supposed to control the world, the people that you're not controlling are problems, and you want to get rid of them as fast as possible, basically. Whereas if you're letting things happen for the most part, as long as it's not antisocial, and have a mild limitation of behaviors, probably in protection to the normal people and their liberties, more so than people can individually decide for themselves in their relationships with other people whether they want to be related to them or associated with them, or cut off ties, or if they want to be antagonistic or friendly or hostile or benevolent and so on, varyingly based on the various situations and so on. And trusting in the majority, the people as a whole, and only intervening on the worst cases whatsoever. So obviously not hate speech, but something like child rape. And punishing the worst cases, even strictly, is actually a principle of effortless action, basically, because most people would agree child rapists should be put to death. So it's about effortless action in that sense, as it said. Um, I know some people might say being in the zone requires a certain degree of activation, but at the same time, being in the zone means you're almost grooving. It's almost like dancing instinctively. You're putting effort in, but it's like it's exuberance. It's not like forced, basically. It's a lot of movement and action, but it's like it's going with the flow of the action naturally, so you can maintain it longer. I mean, the best example of how this works is basically Goku's Ultra Instinct. Um, and the controlling side would be Vegeta's Ultra Ego, and so on. Um, but at the same time, there's a principle of those are still two different approaches to the same thing, where Goku's always using Ultra Instinct, and Vegeta's Ultra Ego gets stronger the harder he gets hit. So there's a contextual degree of responsiveness and so on to Vegeta's Ultra Ego, which is that whole dynamic of socialism spreading and why it spreads and how it spreads faster and faster and faster and so on, and then gets corrected once the process becomes recognized and an antidote is found to it. So yeah, that's all I got. But it's important because I was kind of going socialist midwit, planning and control minded myself in the past, and like I have a problem with it myself, which is why I used to be a leftist in the first place. And just learning to let go of that kind of thing sort of a little bit more is part of my journey to the right wing, basically. I'm still kind of effort oriented, and I'm still kind of nerdy and obsessive about learning and thinking things through and stuff, just naturally as an INTP, but building others up so they can do the decision making for me is kind of more my approach in some ways, although I recognize I have to make my own decisions too, so it's like not perfect. But yeah. I've always been a go hard kind of person, just naturally, and like I've been wrestling with my um, being on welfare, despite trying my best to like make a career entertaining or educating people, and like I might be influential on like some random person. That might actually be possible. I'm not sure. But like, it's one of those things. It's just sort of it's I'm hopeful that I am, because then it would mean I'm useful in some fashion. And if I'm useful for this person, then that would make it so I'm useful for other people, hopefully through them, and then I can basically be like, okay, I worked hard, I helped people out, and I can relax and like, okay, I'm still on welfare, but at least I'm helping other people out, you know. But yeah,